Before getting into JoJo characters solving other franchise cases, I wanted to see how well they can fare against their own. While the Morio Warriors did their job on trying to find Kira as best as they can, the biggest leaps in the case were brought to you by Shigechi, accidentally, and Hayato, because Kira's biggest weakness is himself. With that in mind, could the Stardust Crusaders solve the same case if put into a similar position? To make it difficult and I guess accurate, we'll be removing the Morio Warriors from this. All the enemy stand users are who they are still, but Josuke and Koichi are going to school like normal. I know we'd have to worry about the whole Angelo setting off Josuke and all that, but let's pretend that Angelo is just bothering other people for the time being. Now, what are the utilities we have access to that'll help the group find out that Kira is a problem and eventually find out who he is? Now, while not in Japan at a later age, Joseph had been using his stand Hermit Purple, but Hermit Purple's accuracy had been affected due to the large amount of stand users present in Morio. The main ability is to divine information, meaning that he can display any information that he wishes to see, but as long as there isn't any issues alongside it. He can figure out that there are issues in Morio, but without a specific enough desire or wish, he won't be able to pinpoint Kira. I think it's mainly because of his age and not exactly less because there are a bunch of stand users. I think that is going to be a huge issue, but I feel as though Hermit Purple would have better scope if he had been younger. But, well, after that, what else can we do, right? Kakyoin can cover a large range. That's cool. Avdol had connections back when they were going to find Dio in Egypt, but I don't think he has the right connections in Japan for this. Iggy has a good nose, a great nose even, for when we get evidence or something to work with, and Jotaro and Polnareff are the muscle for now. Now, as for what they're up against, well, we know that Kira is this sinister antagonist with the ability to blend seamlessly into society. And it's not his natural personality, but this crafted facade that he's been able to work and maintain so well. Alongside that, his stand Killer Queen with the ability to turn everything into a bomb completely removes the idea of evidence. He also has a secondary stand called Sheer Heart Attack, so that, you know, even if you were running from Kira and the body's getting hotter, because that's what happens when you're running, Sheer Heart Attack will definitely end up being your demise anyways. So for the Stardust Crusaders, this means confronting an enemy who doesn't stand out, who doesn't wish to conquer or broadcast his power, but simply wish to live quietly with his, deadly compulsions. This challenge is not just finding a needle in a haystack. It's finding a needle that doesn't want to be found in a haystack that's still constantly shifting. It's very difficult. The Crusaders aren't just tasked with identifying him among Morio's tens of thousands of residents, but they're also doing it in a way that can outsmart his caution and his stand's lethal efficiency. Granted, they don't know his stand's lethal efficiency, but you get the idea. I have a way they could figure it out, but it's biased considering that I know what Kira's capable of. I'll try to get into the minds of the characters after, but it is rough. But Joseph at this time has his sense and a lot of money alongside utility with the Speedwagon Foundation. Without drawing attention from the government about, solving a crime over international waters, I think it would be a good move to hire some private investigators in general. Similar to the whole locating Dio's mansion thing that they did. They can do something similar. Just have various investigators around Morio looking for whatever oddities truly exist. But I'm not sure how well that work, because there will be oddities in Morio, but they won't always be Kira because there are a lot of other stand users, so I'm not really sure. The best case scenario is that when Kira is pursuing his next victim, one of the informants are tailing him without him knowing. He will eventually know, but as long as they relay the information of what Kira's build is, Kira's time would be limited. There aren't too many people in Morio that match the description of Kira, so with that in mind, they'd eventually get to him, even if a bunch of stand users had been sent their way. But say that that isn't possible, right? Like, because I've just made it, I guess, extremely easy for the sake of the scenario, but at the same time, like, if I was Joseph with that much money, I'd do the same thing. But, you know, if that isn't possible, then goodness gracious, this might be scary hours for the Stardust Crusaders, because realistically speaking, what are they supposed to do here? Like, honestly, I think it's possible that the Speedwagon Foundation has new technology to help, but we really have to think about it, because Joseph and Jotaro were there originally. And, you know, even if the case is that, you know, Joseph then was just really old, but Jotaro is at least of similar caliber of, you know, old Joseph at a younger age, possibly even better, realistically speaking. And especially considering that, you know, right now he'd be a better vetted stand user at a younger age than Stardust Crusaders Joseph. Like, we really don't want to put this off to the side. Jotaro in part 4 is a really good point in his life, even though Star Platinum for some reason is, you know, it's just weaker. Honestly speaking, I think it would be actually easier to find Kira from Death Note than Kira in part 4, considering that being surrounded by stand users messes with Hermit Purple so much. And I might be hyperbolic, but because it's like, oh, okay, what are we gonna wish with Hermit Purple to actually find Kira? But I think that's just gonna call for the actual video where we go in depth about it and everything. But, you know, genuinely, please, like, what do they do here? I think Iggy could track him if there were any pieces of evidence around to trail him, but how do you find someone who doesn't leave evidence? One of the biggest issues is that I'm also working with what they've given me so far. And L, for example, you know, he works with the police and looks to police reports to see what's going on, to be able to narrow down the type of victim that goes missing, you know, the ratios, the time spans, all that. And, you know, I will say Jotaro does do a pretty good job at trailing behind Kira, you know. For example, you remember when he had went to the apartment after Kira had already been there? Though that's, you know, like, that's a better Jotaro in this instance. Like, this wouldn't be Stardust Crusaders Jotaro. He's nowhere near as smart. I don't want to say stupid, but he's just not as smart as old Jotaro. Like, that's just going to be the case. And I think if old Joseph is potentially as capable as DIU Jotaro, I mean, he's a really smart guy. He's a genius and all that. Then I guess that means that he'd be able to piece it together bit by bit, just probably with as many casualties or maybe more happening than it should. But all it takes is, I guess, one interaction that Kira made contact with something, you know, putting his hand against a wall and left his scent somewhere. That's the best case scenario. It's not that I don't believe that they can't do it. It's just that it's kind of hard to navigate through the character's eyes and try to work off of it all, because considering Stardust Crusaders, they didn't really give us much to work with in terms of, oh, how exactly did you find Dio? Like, yeah, we tracked him down to his big old mansion that he doesn't move around in, because he just stays there. That's his mansion. He's not going anywhere. He's still trying to reach in, you know? It's a lot different than Kira, who's just moving around throughout Morio, doing whatever the heck he wants to do because he can. Now, it's easy to say that they'll eventually get him for whatever reason. Like, that would be the correct YouTuber response, that, you know what, they do get him in the end, due to the fact that, you know, they're not necessarily given a time span, and it's just more so about getting him before he ends up getting them. But I guess that's the great thing, because you have a bunch of hitters with the Stardust Crusaders, so him getting them is not real, like, that's gonna be a lot of trouble for him. If given the same time span as DIU before Kira got Bites the Dust, and I was asked, hey, could they do it before that if given the same exact amount of time? Then I'll say that it's possible, purely for the fact that everyone took care of their personal goals at the end of part 3, and they don't have to deal with any of that now and just go about a bunch of side missions and yada yada yada. That's not everything that they have to deal with. They're purely just focused on, hey, we got to get this Kira guy. But my thing is how, you know, that's the issue. I think the signs point towards that it'll be extremely difficult / they just can't. If they were given an actual, like, good set amount of time, it's just like, hey, how exactly are you going to do this? Please give me all the answers and thoroughly explain as to why they can fully do it. I honestly don't have anything for that, you know. Now, I do think that I'm going to end up seeing something like I've potentially largely missed, and they'll be like, oh, it's in the comments, and it'll be like, oh, well, what did you didn't consider about this thing? But Sometimes these comments also have everyone having a counter argument for the same thing, and that's why the big comments don't even work all the time. So now I see that, but I do want to know in general. But I took a good look at like all of our stand users, what they're capable of in terms of power, and it's just assessing more so their intelligence than anything that they can actually do. Joseph was our best case, and he was already here. I understand that he was weaker, but he was here, and we would end up probably having the same issues even if Hermit Purple had been more efficient. Again, really look at how Kira in general had been discovered. It was a bit by bit process of I don't want to say a lot of his own follies, but if we're being real with ourselves, if Kira had moved just a tiny bit better and was a little bit more on his toes, he wouldn't have even gotten caught. He's extra. And if we're purely going off of the fact that him being extra will eventually be the reason why the Stardust Crusaders beat him, then fine, but that does sound like a cop-out answer, to be honest with you. Now, as a final answer, they should be able to, but I personally can't see how directly, you know, especially considering the Morio Warriors, with a lot of the members that lived there for a large period amount of their life and yada yada, also didn't figure it out either. And you have Jotaro, who has more resources in this time of 1999, who he didn't find him either before Hayato. That was just the case. He didn't, and it's really rough to see here. And before saying bye, also think about this. We have Crazy Diamond, who can essentially like, oh, hey, here's a piece of the hair. Let's make it go back to the user. Like, there wasn't enough evidence ever left, period. And normally, if that was the case, they probably wouldn't been able to, they would be able to capitalize on that. But we don't get anything. Why? Because you're probably not going to. He's a very, very meticulous killer. And I can see as to why he ends up winning in this case. Thank you all for watching. I might spin this around and have the Morio Warriors or some other group in JoJo try to see if they can find Kira from Death Note. Ooh. But that's all on reception, you know. Hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, peace out and Godspeed.